There you go, there you go. On behalf of the Interagency Sexual Ethics Task Force, I get the honor of introducing to you Betty and Gere Reist. They are going to be leading us in the role-playing section of this really important work, and so I'm going to allow you just to talk a little bit more about yourself. You are a quilter. You weren't written up in here, so I didn't get all. Yes, you are. Where are you at?
On the back.
Oh, on the back. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
because she hyphenated her name, so she's further down the alphabet.
Yes, they did. That is my mistake. I'm sorry, Betty. I'm
You can
sorry.
read all about it.
But they both have just wonderful gifts and skills to bring to us, and I think it'll be an enlightening time. So I'm going to allow you guys to say hello, and so just help us welcome them, and we're happy.
Well, good afternoon. You're all going to be part of this. You're all going to play the congregation. And I've invited some friends of mine from Susquehanna Conference to help us with some of the parts, because they've been prompted on what their roles are. And we'll hopefully make this a good learning experience. We're going to do 3 segments. The first one is going to be meeting with staff. The second one is going to be meeting with Staff Parish Relations Committee. The third one is going to be meeting with the whole congregation and breaking the congregation into small groups and meeting. So we've got some, how should I put this? We've got a situation that's just like real life. We don't know what's going to happen. Because we're asking you to be enrolled with the sequence. And the scene that we saw, the stage that was set for us the first day. John and Sally. John has been removed from the church. For our purposes, he's on suspension, but he's not returning. Okay? And for our purposes as well, everything's going to be abbreviated. We are going to cram into this hour and a half that we have together what would normally be about 8 hours. Okay? So forgive us when we rush through things and don't actually do a worship service. But you understand the necessities of this. So, Betty, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. But I just want to say that we have a whole group of handouts here that you can take and use as they are. You can amend them, you can change them in any way that suits your needs.
Right here.
The mic is not working.
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
So it's not loud.
Something.
Use your outside voice, Betty. Is that better? Okay. What did you say?
Yeah.
Eat the mic.
Okay.
That's better.
Take the handouts, use them in any way that suits your needs within your conference, amend them, throw them out altogether, use them as a blueprint for whatever you need.
They're suggestive, not prescriptive. And one other thing about them, if you use them, we're asking that Cosmo sends them out as email, as that digital files for you. If you use them and you're not from Susquehanna Conference, delete the Susquehanna Conference reference. And if you see anything that we missed that involves somebody's phone number, delete that too, because we don't want people calling from the wrong conference to be in touch. But that pretty much takes us to where we are. So I'm going to ask if the staff members of Wilderness United Methodist Church would come up front, because we're about to start our meeting, and the district superintendent and I are going to be there, and my wife is going to be one of the response team members with me, and we're going to try to have a meeting.
No, staff.
Staff meeting, not staff parish, that's the next one. Okay.
They say both. They all say both.
Yeah, because it's similar pattern.
That's going to either have you turn it up, or you're going to have to put the mic right up there. There you go.
Okay, we'll try to remember
Perfect,
to
perfect.
keep it right close there. Okay.
We're going to pass this mic around?
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm going to just take a moment. I also need to point out to you, the first thing on your sheet, the call to action plan, that's not actually a part of this workshop, but that's for you to take with you as part of your planning to implement the team in your annual conference setting. So I want to thank you for coming this afternoon. I know you've taken time out of a busy schedule, and I really appreciate you being here. We know that what happens in this church depends very heavily on you. I'd like to introduce Mike Minix, who is our district superintendent. I think you've all met him before. And my wife Betty, who is the chairperson of the response team. And I'd like to ask you to introduce yourselves, because Betty doesn't know you and I don't know you.
I'm Tom, and I'm the youth pastor.
I'm Louise, and I'm the business manager for the church.
Well, Louise, would you mind handing your microphone over to the district superintendent so he can do his part?
Well, I'm glad to be here with you. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances, but there are some things that are very important for you to know as you work in this congregation and as you interpret what has happened in this congregation to folks who will have lots and lots of questions. First thing I want to say a word about is the ministerial covenant. You know, it's very much like a contract that clergy have with the conference whom I represent. And there are certain things that when a person is ordained, that the conference agrees to do for them. And one of those things is to provide them with an appointment, for example. But there are things that the clergy agree to do in response. And you know, they agree to serve with faithfulness and diligence, and to do that in certain important ways. One of those ways is the clergy agree to keep themselves you know, morally on a very high road. And the pastor here at Wilderness has failed to do that. And so we find ourselves in this situation where he has certainly broken trust with the congregation, but he has in a very specific way violated the covenant that we as a conference have with the clergy who serve the local churches. And whenever there's a violation of that covenant, there are certain prescribed procedures and manners of addressing those violations. And so that's what we're in the middle of here, and that's what you're discovering. Any questions about that?
Jerry, it is, we aren't hearing you back here, so it's very difficult, very barely hearing you, so we gotta figure this out, so we can have an
Okay.
effective.
Were you having trouble? Oh, is that?
Move the speaker back to the center, I guess, or turn up the volume
We're
some
gonna come
more.
back and you can vote.
Yeah, those of you who can't
Whether it's the volume coming up or whatever the situation, we need something.
Somebody can move up that's the seats.
Right on our chairs, right here.
Thank you.
Jerry, can I ask a question?
Yes,
You have two handouts that are
Okay.
titled SPRC and church visitors. Is the first one supposed to be staff's meeting, the 1:45 to 2:30 p.m. or?
no, they follow a similar pattern. So the handout can be used for either or both.
Okay.
But they are
But they're not the
They're not the same. They're suggestive, not prescriptive. So there's two different patterns of how you can proceed with this that are suggestions to you. Just providing, I'm sorry for the confusion, it's just providing you that there are different ways of approaching it depending on what your situation is, what your needs are in your congregation.
So this isn't for you, this isn't for you.
No.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. This would be, these outlines are for you to use pick one to use or to build on, to modify in a setting you go into. Obviously, we just don't have time in this setting to do this. So we're going to move along through the process. And I'm going to say, Mike, you've talked about the covenant. What does the conference have to say to a congregation that's where the covenant's been broken?
Well, there are lots of things that we can say. Depending upon how the congregation responds and what the needs are. I think whenever a pastor leaves under the kind of duress that this pastor has experienced and is causing, it breaks relationships. And for the congregation, our goal is twofold. First of all, to give them some measure of understanding of what the process is that we are in. And the second is to bring as quickly and as well as we can some measure of healing for that congregation so they can move ahead in ministry and remain as balanced and as coherent as they can in their proclamation of the gospel.
I have a question, being the youth director, that it's hard for our adults of the congregation to understand what's happening, but it's really difficult for the young people to understand. And I want to know, in what you're talking about, how are they to help, how do they get some help in understanding? Because the pastor is well loved by them as well.
Our response team has individuals that work well with youth and can help explain the situation with youth and have a separate meeting and explain this to them.
I want to ask the two of you as staff in this church, you're probably getting a lot of questions and a lot of pressure. And I wonder how you're handling that, what you're experiencing.
Well, I hate to get to money and business right away, but we all know that this church is in the middle of a major capital campaign. And, those of us who are close to it have been watching current expense giving dip and go down just as a result of that. When news breaks about this and everyone hears, I'm very concerned about our immediate sustainability. So I'm interested to hear what the conference suggests we do to stop what might be an immediate and fatal bleed out here.
Well, and for me, just like the other adults, but as a staff, it's sort of a double whammy in that the pastor not only has betrayed trust with the congregation, but he's our immediate supervisor. And it's almost like a double whammy. We've looked up to him. And so there is a distinction between just sitting in the pew and then working for this individual.
The conference is going to be working, the cabinet is going to be working to appoint someone here who will help bring healing to the congregation and help in this current crisis. Conference, during this period of suspension, will be paying the salary for that person, even as you continue to pay the salary for the pastor who's left, while he remains on suspension.
Thank you.
That addresses one immediate concern. And I'm sorry, Tom.
Go ahead.
You're hurt. That's what I hear.
Yeah.
And we're so sorry that that's happened. We all know what it is to be hurt in relationships, and we are very sorry that this has happened to you. It's part of what the DS was talking about There's a covenant, and it's been broken. And when the covenant is broken, it's painful for everybody involved. I want you to know that we don't feel what you feel, but we are feeling pain as well. And we want to share that pain with you in this, because this is a horrible situation.
It is.
But let me ask you a question, Tom. What scriptures do you turn to in times like this?
Well, there are times, you know, from Isaiah, when you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. When you walk through the water, you will not drown. That's what I'm feeling right now, you know, because this is just devastating to our congregation. And right in the middle of a campaign. I mean, there was such hope and for the future, and it rested upon, you know, the pastor. He was a cornerstone in this, moving it forward. Suddenly, that's just crushed. It's gone.
And, you know, taking off my business hat and treating this personally, I'm part of the women's group here, and we feel very, very sorry for what happened to, you know, the victim here. And we're worried that other women are going to be concerned about coming here and placing their trust in the next pastor. We're just really confused and hurt and trying to go by day and do what we can. We still want to be the church.
Well, I hear you too, and I want to join Jerry in reassuring you that as a conference, you know, as a superintendent and representing the bishop and the annual conference, we understand where you are. You know, we have walked with other congregations through this kind of process also. We have considerable resources to help you deal with some of your immediate needs. As Jerry mentioned, we'll be providing you with an interim pastor who is equipped to help you understand and begin to heal from this trauma. And that kind of sensitivity will be applied to seeking you a new pastor in a more permanent way a bit later on. But we have resources that we will make available to you, not the least of which is the response team, who will be here to help with that healing work, that pastoral work, but also the resources of my office, the bishop, and the annual conference to help you with the more day-to-day and long-term resources that a congregation needs to survive and function. You know, I hear that you're concerned for your church and that you are discouraged. I hope what we can convey to you today is, though, that despite what has happened and the disappointment of it and the severity of it, all is not lost. There's still hope, and there's still a future. I dare say that the best days of Wilderness Church are yet to be. Hang in there.
Well, you know, in reflecting on this, it's almost like a tsunami that's come. We didn't see it heading our way. There was no warning, and suddenly, within a matter of minutes, everything has changed in our church. And part of it is just trying to wrap our head around this, in addition to, you know, the betrayal that we feel.
The response team will be meeting with your pastor-parish relations committee and with the congregation. And we are also going to work with you as leaders of this church to put in place some educational programs. Because as we've understood the story, people were not aware of the warning signs. And we want to help you understand, so this is not something that you're responsible for, you're faulted anyway. But it's helpful for you to know when there are warning signs of something happening. And we know that, for example, your pastor started spending a lot of time alone. And we know that he stopped attending the group of clergy. So he was gradually withdrawing from the support system. When that happens, we know that's a warning sign. And so we're going to be, as part of the educational program for the church, be providing that. And hopefully that will provide some comfort to the women as we understand the process and know how we can protect against such things happening in the future. Now, friends, we obviously could go on with this, but we have to move on to the next segment. So, thank you very much for coming. Mike, you don't get to leave. You guys,
We're staff, so we go.
I need some volunteers for staff parish. I have the staff parish chairperson here, and I need some volunteers to sit on the staff parish relations committee.
You want response team members?
Yeah, we'll if you want to be on the PPR committee, come on up front. And we've got more chairs. We can move chairs around. So.
We're good, all the chairs are taken.
So they have more chairs.
Can I ask 2 questions?
Sure.
I missed you defining what your role was. We had superintendent. Who were you in this?
I'm the coordinator for the staff meeting and the coordinator for the staff parish relations committee meeting. My wife is the chairperson. And normally it wouldn't be a husband-wife team, but we just happen to be for this situation.
So you're from the response team?
Yes.
We're from the response team,
Okay.
working on behalf of the response team.
And is this the first that staff and SPRC and someone are hearing?
This is a first gathering
Okay, thank you.
with response team representatives.
Normally, there would be a lot more. There was a bigger response team for these meetings. We don't have room or time.
But my question kind of parallels hers. They were very calm, so the assumption is that there's been some time. They've already been told about this, it's been announced in church.
That's correct.
They've had some time to process it, because they were way too calm for what
That was my question, exactly.
Yeah, what I did.
Yeah.
We could set this is Saturday after the announcement the previous Sunday.
Okay.
We should probably set that in place. And when we have the staff parish, or when we have the meeting with the congregation, we're going to make that Sunday afternoon, the second Sunday. Now, let me also put in a warning. And Elaine, you want to?
I was just going to say that normally in the first, when it's announced, there's so much shock that there's not a lot of anger. By Saturday, there's usually anger.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a real representation.
Right.
Although Tom and Louise, no matter where they are going to be calm and non-anxious. But normally that staff meeting would be a little more contentious, wouldn't you say, Jer?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And Elaine, by the way, is our coordinator for Susquehanna Conference response team. We have worked together for many years.
Yes, we have.
Too many to count, so. And I have to say that I cheated. I asked Tom and Louise to do the staff people because I wanted to move into a relatively mild opening so you didn't all get scared away. But now I don't know how any of these staff parish people up here are going to react, except I have an idea what the chairperson's going to be, because we had a conversation on the phone about setting up this meeting. So, Betty, you want to pull up a chair so you can...
broken.
Yes, the back of the chair.
You got it? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So, friends, I want to thank you for coming out today. I especially want to thank you, Wendy, for the work you put into pulling this together this afternoon. Would you mind introducing your committee to me, or should we just ask them to go around?
I think that would be best.
Okay.
My name is Beverly, member of the committee. I'm Wendy, the chair of the staff parish committee.
And I'm Mike, the district superintendent.
And I'm Beverly, I've been here for 15 years.
And I'm Gina, I'm a member of the committee.
And I'm Betty, I'm part of the response team.
And I'm Jerry, and I'm part of the response team as well. Oh, Mike, would you lead us in an opening prayer and and do the apology for us?
Okay. When I meet with groups like this,
By the way, I have to say, I don't ask for them to do the apology. They know that's where they are in the process.
right. There's an apology that I need to make to this committee and to the congregation. And I want to apologize for the fact that it is written, and I will read it, but that's very important, so that everybody hears the same thing, the same words, and that there's not any doubt or any room for confusion about what I have said. This congregation has suffered from the misconduct of a pastor. On behalf of the conference, my colleague pastors, the cabinet, and the bishop, I apologize and ask your forgiveness. What happened here affects us all. We have, though not perfect, a policy in place. We are conscientiously working to prevent such situations from arising, and when they do arise, we seek to respond promptly and effectively to remove the offending pastor and to provide appropriate support for the congregation. Would you pray with me? For your presence, O God, and your loving care, we are grateful, especially in this time. Move among us with your loving spirit. Encourage and help us to focus upon you and upon the tasks at hand, for we are seeking the best for this congregation and all its members, and for the ministries of this church as we seek to find your ways to move forward. We, in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Mike. We'd like to hear from you where you are right now, what you're feeling and experiencing as you're going through this. So, Beverly, can I ask you to go first? And by the way, if you don't feel that you can, just say pass, and pass the microphone on to somebody else. But if you do feel that you have something you want to share, we're open, and we can come back to you later if you feel the need to pass.
I'm confused. I'm angry. I have a million questions. I don't understand what has happened. I don't know what's going on, and I'm trying not to be too emotional about it, but, and I'm trying to remember, I'm a member of Staff Parish, and so we have a responsibility here. But I have about 1,000,001 questions, and I'm angry and really hurt at this point.
Absolutely, Beverly. A lot of us are really stressed about everything that has happened here and are not real happy with the response of the church. You know, my phone has been ringing off the hook in the last week with parishioners calling me very upset and confused, like Beverly is describing, angry. There are lots of people who feel like Pastor John has been treated very unfairly here. I mean, you know, what we heard was that he didn't have sex with that parishioner, and so we're wondering why you all took him out. And so, you know, we're having some trouble here with what you guys did and knowing, you know, where are we going to go from here?
I'm just so upset. You know, Pastor John took us to the Holy Land. Holy Land. He baptized 2 of our children, and he confirmed my 14-year-old. And I just don't understand how you people let this happen.
Yeah, my phone's been ringing off the hook too. I work with the youth, and the youth are asking questions, and I just don't know what to tell them. Like, some of them are angry, some of them are not surprised. They've been kind of sharing some stories of some other questionable things, and it's like, I don't know what to do with all that information. And so, what are we supposed to tell people?
You can tell people that your pastor has done good work. He has done baptisms, he's done weddings, he's done confirmations. Those are all good things. He had a problem. And we're gonna deal with it. We're gonna listen to you, we're gonna give you resources, we're gonna walk with you in this whole process.
It's really hard when y'all are like, okay, y'all are gonna do this, but we don't really know what has happened. Like, I mean, how much information are we gonna get?
Right, why was he kicked out?
John violated the ministerial trust. And when that happens, our policy is for immediate suspension. Because we don't know what else may be involved. And it's to protect both John and the members of the congregation. Because in a circumstance like this, there may be other complaints that come forward. But if we continue John's placement in the congregation, there may also be accusations that can't be defended against. So by pulling him out, putting him on suspension, we protect him. We also protect the church members from any other possibility of abuse by him. I want to clarify that even though he has instructions not to be in touch with you, you're free to say whatever you want in terms of communicating with him, to share your concern, I suggest by cards or notes. We still care for him, and as his clergy colleagues, we will continue to walk with him until there's resolution of this. But we can't force the resolution to come too quickly, because if we do, we put the church at deeper risk and we put him at deeper risk. And at this point, we have nothing to report back from him. He is in seclusion and has not communicated back to us as to next steps. But the response team will be assigning someone to walk with him, and that person will be contacting him. Well, I think they've already tried to reach out to him twice. We're hopeful they'll be able to make contact and establish a relationship. We don't want anybody to walk through this alone. We want everybody who's affected to have someone walk with them through this process. The accusations that were made against John were that he had a relationship inappropriate with a woman in the congregation. That's what specifically makes the necessity of removing him from the situation. We do not want to see anything expand into violence or any assault from the angry people who were involved. And I say that not because people are angry, but because people have a right to be angry if they feel they've been hurt. We recognize those feelings. We share some of them. But we also have to honor the fact that he's done good things. And nobody is pure. Nobody is perfect. We all make mistakes. And this is the best way we know at this point how to love both him and you as a congregation.
So we've been like a family here, and it feels like part of our family's just been cut off. And at the same time, you told us that this involves a woman in our church, who I assume is also part of our family. Who's reaching out to her? How do we reach out to her? Because she's part of our family as well. And what do we do? Because I understand you can't tell us who it is, but help.
I want to assure you that she has also been assigned an advocate to walk with her. And we will provide, as a conference, counseling for her. And we will do everything in our power to make sure that she is cared for. We will not reveal her name. But I have to ask you, as leaders of this church, if she self-reveals, or if someone else reveals, that you reach out to her And even though you may be angry to some extent because this has surfaced, that you don't take that anger out on her, because she is suffering in this as well. And what are we as a Christian family unless we can show care and nurture for one another?
Sherry, you may want to, because part of this role is to inform the SPR about their responsibility for pastor in the next 90 to 100 days. Many of them may not know that.
That's right. Thank you, Tom. Yeah. Let me share with you that while your pastor is on suspension, the conference will be assigning people to pastor the congregation. Someone will be appointed as an interim pastor, and their salary will be paid by the conference. Your responsibility while he's on suspension is to continue to pay the salary for John. This is a protection for the family. We make sure everybody has health insurance during this time of suspension. We make sure everybody is cared for. We share the pain in this. The only thing we know to do is to be as loving as we can as we walk through the process.
We'd like to ask you, as SPCR members, to help quell some of the anger within the congregation when it bursts forth. There are support people that are available for you or for anyone else in the congregation that feels they need extra support. Someone to talk to, someone to help explain the situation. We will be having response team members that are specifically trained to deal with youth, meet with them, and explain the situation to them. So if you need more help, let us know.
Now, we're going to have to move along because we've got to move to the congregational meeting. So, friends, that's an aside for us in the process, but let me share with you this last thing. You are the leaders of the congregation. We want to support you in any way we can. The congregational meeting will be an opportunity for people to share their concerns in a broader way. We depend on you to let us know and to help us know when we need to come back. We're available. This is not a one-shot deal. We need you to help us know when there's somebody in the congregation who needs special care. We also need you to welcome the interim pastor and help him be aware of special needs in the congregation. I don't know if John left his visitation list for the shut-ins or not, but if you know of people who need special care, I hope you will help the interim pastor know that so that we can bring healing as quickly as possible to this congregation. It won't happen overnight, but you have a future, and where we go from here depends on how we perceive that future and what we do together to build it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We would typically end with a closing prayer. And one of the things you saw, nobody carries the whole weight for the response team. The team works together, even when they're out of character and off stage. Because that's how we do it. This is some of the most painful, difficult work in the life of the church. And we're talking about a mild situation here. When the person who stood up and said, you've painted this in the worst possible way, I needed to say, I have had a number of situations as a district superintendent, and that's the absolute mildest situation I've been involved in. So, now, typically, we would ask the staff parish relations chairperson to introduce the team leader, who would then take over introducing the rest of the team, and the district superintendent. But right now, I'm just telling you that's what we did.
Okay, now we're on to the congregational meeting, and I need 8 people to be response team members, and the rest of you are gonna be the congregation. You can ask questions, you can get as riled up as you want, because that's what you're going to experience. And you might as well jump in with both feet. Okay, can I have 8 people to be response team, to try and answer these questions? Aren't you training to be response team members? Okay, come on up.
Come on, guys.
Oh, no, I want to be in the
I'm not
congregation.
gonna be a response team member.
I got my
You guys
character.
are the response team. We need a few more. This is a big church.
Big guys.
This is a big church.
Another guy.
Come on up.
Still a guy.
Okay. I will play the part of the response team convener. Okay? We'll do it that way. I'd like to welcome you here this afternoon. And my name is Betty Reist. I am the response team convener and will be leading this meeting. I'm going to ask the response team to introduce themselves.
I'm Beverly, and I serve as pastor of the church on the west side.
I'm Claudia, and I'm a layperson, and I've been involved with the response team for about 10 years.
I'm Sharon. I am a local pastor and I'm also a social worker.
I'm Deborah, serving as a layperson with the church in Dallas, and I too am a resource person.
I'm Steve Mitchell, and I'm a retired clergy person in the conference, but not finished yet.
And I'm Jerry, and I'm still active in the conference, but I'm looking forward to retirement.
Okay. At this point, we would normally do a short worship service. We have a sample one there for you. And all we're going to do is do the opening prayer. If someone would like to read that. Somebody can read the opening prayer here for us?
Merciful God, we ask your presence among us. Keep us ever mindful of your love and compassion as we are in the midst of struggle. We seek your guidance and strength. Allow your presence to overflow our minds and hearts so that we may return to a joyful life together in your service. And I'll say, Amen. Amen.
You've already heard the ministerial covenants, you've heard the apology. Those would normally be part of this. So we are now going to take questions from the congregation, if you have questions, and the response team will be answering those questions. Feel free to answer them as you feel you are able. Anybody have questions?
So some of us have heard rumors of who the parishioner is that our pastor was involved with, and we're really concerned about why is he being penalized for this? Why is this his fault? If he was involved in an affair, why is this his fault? You know, some of us have thought perhaps she threw herself at him. You know, why is he being punished?
In a pastoral situation, the pastor is the person who is always expected to maintain the highest degree of integrity. Every time we step into a pulpit, we hold the care for an entire congregation in our hands. Every time we preach, every time we speak with somebody. So while it may be hard to understand, there's a sort of power differential, if you will, and the pastor needs to guard carefully against anything that he or she may do or way they may respond to somebody who's vulnerable.
So that's just hard for some of us to understand because it seems like these are two adults, you know, and it's hard for some of us to get why it's all his fault.
One of the things that happens in all our lives is that we run into times of crisis when we're vulnerable. A pastor is responsible for knowing how the pastor responds in those situations. The person who's in crisis is not necessarily expected to know how they're emotionally going to respond. So there's a relationship that develops when someone's counseling. And when someone's counseling, or when someone is working with another person and there's a crisis that evolves, it's important for the pastor to be responsible for managing their feelings, because you can't expect the person in crisis to be managing theirs.
Thank you. So now we know that it was someone in counseling with the pastor who had an affair with him. I didn't know that till you said that. What I want to know is, are you the one running the investigation, or who is? Is there a confession that's been signed? What can we do? Well, not what we can do, because I don't trust what you say, but I'm going to be defending my friend and my pastor. But I just want to say I don't trust this process, and I don't understand how he could have broken a ministerial covenant if there hasn't been any fact-finding yet or investigation. So I'm just really unclear on the process with all this, but I'm taking close notes. God bless you.
Bless you, brother. First of all, we are not the body that does the fact-finding. That's not our job. We're here as the response team to walk through this process with the congregation. We're here to provide you, as the congregation, with spiritual support. That's our job. We don't know all the facts. We don't need to know all of the facts. We're simply here to provide spiritual support for you.
Jerry, pass that one.
I'm going to pass that to the DS when it's his turn.
Well, I'm just angry. I am really angry. I mean, you're all the hierarchy. So where is the forgiveness in all of this? Where is Jesus' forgiveness?
Bridget.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. I'll speak from this standpoint. As a laity, I do understand and I sympathize with everybody. Because when you look at your pastor or your minister, you have expectations that you do not see because now what has taken place. But as a lay person, we all know that we all have a responsibility. And to look just to him or her to give you that spiritual guidance, it is disappointing when these types of things do happen. But we must be mindful that we too have responsibility and that we too are put on a level that I would say not above the pastor, but eye level. Because I feel that there comes a point in time when you really need to stop and think and not only just become so judgmental of him or the person or whomever or us, but to just think that we do have a responsibility and to be mindful and to be prayerful of these situations, because there's so much that comes with it that you would really and truly be floored at some of the things that we do come across, because it's not an easy journal. I mean, easy, well, your journal education, you want to do some journaling, but it's not an easy journey. And to make it easy for everybody, here again, as a lay person, I do feel that it's my responsibility to walk in to give you the assurance that I'm not going to stand and say everything is going to be okay, but I will say that we are here to help you to understand the process. We're here to help you to get along with the process. And if there are questions, then yes, there are individuals or there will be time from time resources that will be made readily available to you that will help you along to understand everything that's going on.
Well, when's our pastor coming back? When's our pastor coming back? This is a church, and I just want to know, when is our pastor coming back?
But realistically, here again, we cannot answer that with specificity because we don't know ourselves.
Well, aren't you the leaders? Aren't you the leaders?
Where's the bishop? How come they didn't show up?
We are the response team, and maybe it'd be helpful to remind you exactly what that is. But we are pastors and lay people in churches just like yours. We're all volunteers. We're not part of the hierarchy. We are not the people that make the decisions. We are people that have a passion for people who are hurting. And we've been trained to try to come in and walk with you during your time of hurting. We've done this in other churches. And the hurt is so great. But we don't have all the answers because we're not the ones that gather the facts. We're not the ones that assign a pastor or anything else. We're volunteers who love you and love God and just want to walk with you so that you know you're not alone.
But you didn't answer, where is forgiveness?
I like to talk now.
Betty and Louie always do that.
I am ashamed of my congregation right now. I cannot believe with all that's going on in our country in the last 2 weeks that y'all could act that way to these people. You don't know all the women and the men in this room who have been abused. You don't know our stories. And so how dare you come up here and yell at them and expect that our pastor didn't do something. You have no idea and you need to shut up.
My daughter is one who has wanted to stay away from the pastor for a long time for a variety of reasons. But she said she and the other girls in the youth group refer to him as Pastor Octopus because he can't keep his hands to himself. Is there any possibility that something else has happened that we don't know about?
There's always the possibility that something else has happened that we don't know about. And we would encourage your daughter or anybody else who has any specific concerns to share those with our district superintendent or share them with one of us, and we'd be happy to go with you to talk to our district superintendent. This is part of that sort of fact gathering, and while we're not the ones that gather the facts, sometimes when we hear about something that's happened, other people do come forward. And so again, we want to walk with you with that, and I'm really distressed to hear that that's how your daughter has felt about the pastor. Would love to be able to talk with her.
Anybody else?
I'll be a different person. Just quickly, I'm a different person now, and I want to thank you for being here. And now, in this context, I want to go on to share a very revealing, traumatic experience that I've never told anyone about, and I'm going to talk about it for 15 minutes.
Okay. Who wants to respond to that?
I want to thank you all too for being here, and I want to thank everyone for everything that you have said and expressed. Everyone, no exceptions. This is hard stuff. This is terrible stuff. And there's not a single one of us who expected to be here today doing this or wants to be here today doing this. Not a single one, not me, not you, not anybody. But it's important work for us to do. I want to assure you as a congregation that you are very much in our hearts and our prayers. We know and we feel the brokenness that you're experiencing, that you're expressing now. And I'm speaking on my behalf, but also on behalf of the bishop and the rest of the cabinet and the other churches of this conference. Don't give up hope. There are those who are working hard and diligently to care for you. I and the bishop and the rest of the cabinet are working to care for your pastoral needs. We're working to continue to oversee the work of your pastor and his future. We are doing the administrative work that needs to be done. The response team is here to do the pastoral work that needs to be done. And there's significant communication between us. No question that there are lots of questions that are not answered. But I want to reiterate something that Jerry said. What did you say in this group or somewhere else, Jerry? There are some things you don't know. And there's some things we can't tell you. And the reason for that is that one of the things that we're doing is trying to protect your pastor and trying to protect his family. So there are certain things that we just can't discuss openly. There are things that we can't talk about because we're protecting you. And trying to protect others among you who may have similar experiences, who haven't talked about them yet, and may not talk about them easily. We're done. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I probably stepped on that.
We are going to move into small groups at this time.
Wait a minute, why are we going into small groups? Why can't we all just talk together here? Why do we have to go into small groups?
Because not everyone in this congregation might feel comfortable talking in a large group.
But if we get information that they don't get, it's not going to be fair. We need to all stay together.
We need to know what everybody thinks. We all want to know what everybody thinks.
We're a whole family.
Yeah, we're a family.
The family ought to stay together.
That's right. Preach it.
What did you do?
We want to be able to give everyone an equal chance to speak and to hear. And we want to be able to give everyone here a chance to speak and
They
hear
can
each
speak.
other.
They can speak.
And
They can
there's
speak
no
right here.
way that we can all do that in our little group, but we will come back together after the small groups meet to get a report from each of the small groups. So be patient. Where's the grace I keep hearing? The grace is
Lay on the
this journey through pain, hopefully to some healing and some love and a new beginning.
Okay, normally we would ask the congregation to count off in like maybe, depending on the size, so that there's about 6 people in each small group. And we do that so that family members are split up. So if someone who might be intimidated by someone else in their family is not influenced, okay? Right now, we're going to have you, maybe every 2 rows as a small group, and these folks are going to let you talk, and they're going to answer your questions in small groups.
Let me clarify. We talked about answering questions. The primary function of the response team is not to answer questions. It's to walk with you. Sometimes you want an answer to a question to let you express yourself a little bit more. We try not to get into any kind of conversation about this is the charge, the details of the charge. We don't know that stuff. We don't share that stuff. But we do need to be able to respond a little bit to questions like, why can't I talk to my pastor? If you see him in the grocery store, you can talk to him. It's just that we're trying to protect him and you. from the complications. So those are the kinds of answers we want to be able to give, not detailed kinds of things.
I just wonder if that doesn't set you up for quite a stressful and frustrating situation unless their questions have been answered at some other time. So, I mean, to me, at least for me, we're starting brand new with the response team. We've never had one in North Carolina. And I'm thinking that a response team would be set up for failure if they come somewhere where all they can say is, I can't answer that, I can't answer that. So they're going to come, this congregation's going to come with questions, and they'll be frustrated. So somebody who does have the authority to answer those questions need to be before us.
And the first thing that normally happens in the process that's public, after the DS has called the Staff Parish Relations Committee chairperson and scheduled it and announced that the DS is going to be preaching that Sunday and going to be present in the congregation, in that initial statement to the congregation, there'd be a statement something like the apology and something like, John has been removed from ministry, is on suspension for this period of time as the situation is being investigated. This is for his protection, the protection of the congregation. That kind of information would be shared in the congregational meeting at the beginning of this process. This is a little bit later, and you're assumed to know a little bit more about it, but you've got a lot of anxieties in the congregation. They're going to be expressed in the small groups. It's one of the reasons we moved to the small groups, so everybody gets a chance to express their feelings.
I just want to share, having been a former DS, we have also shared with congregations before this time a letter from the DS and from the pastor. And so the pastor's letter has been vetted by the DS, where the pastor is asking for some time alone so that they can do some self-care, so that the congregation receives that in the pastor's own words. But I will say that that letter is vetted before it is shared, and then it is mailed to every household, but it is after there's a formal announcement. So the parishioners know that the pastor does not intend to hear from them or need to hear from them at this point.
Before we break into small groups, there's some rules for small groups. You have some handouts. Everyone speaks for themselves. We don't want to hear somebody said. Everybody gets a chance to speak. We want to hear what you feel, what you think. Okay? So if you can get in your groups, and your response team will meet you there.
Betty, in response to what the lady in the back asked, we always have a district superintendent who comes to that congregational meeting to answer questions. So the response team is not in a position to answer those specific questions about what's happening with their pastor and so forth, but we, in our conference, we have a district superintendent, not the one from that area. So not that pastor or that church's district superintendent, but another district superintendent accompanies the response team for that congregational meeting to be the kind of voice of authority and answer questions. So that there is an opportunity for people to get answers at the meeting. Right, that's shared in the big meeting before we break into small groups.
Okay, can we break up into our small groups now?
So these guys have to go around.
Yes. These people are going to break up into their small groups, and each of you are going to take a group. Things that came up that you needed to share.
We did notice that with the questions from the congregation that it seemed like the response team was pretty much supporting the pastor, and we didn't hear it explicitly said that you were supporting the victim also.
Anybody want to respond to that?
There was a situation in ours where one of the group members expressed that he and his family were probably not going to be coming back because he didn't want his children to be exposed to this. And so another group member was concerned, expressed concern about that group member and his family. And it was suggested that this group member expressing concern for their family was directed directly now to the family, to the young man, the family man, and they began to interact with each other. And that was, to me, that was a shift that drew the congregation together and got them to begin engaging. I thought that was an important opportunity that the process offered.
The victim in this situation, that's what we're calling her at this time, has a support person. She is not left out there on her own. She has someone walking with her, supporting her, walking her through the process. Anything else? Yes?
Nobody's mentioned the church office worker who got fired.
By the pastor.
That came up in our group. As a newly revealed fact, which then the district superintendent said he would take.
Did you hear that? It came up in their group as a newly revealed fact. And the district superintendent said he would take on that situation.
What came up as a newly revealed fact?
That, what was she?
Fired, the office manager.
The office manager was fired.
The whistleblower.
Right, the whistleblower was fired. Okay? Where do we go from here? How are you feeling as a whole? Do you want the response team to come back and meet with you again at a later date?
We're too emotional to make that decision right now. Can we come back to it?
You can absolutely come back to that. You will have our phone number. You can call us at any time, and we would be glad to come back and meet with you again.
I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
What about the other additional potential problems, like with the octopus ants?
Yes. I was about to get to that.
All right, thank you.
If there is anyone that would like to speak one-on-one with a response team member, you are free to do that once we break up here. I do want to tell you that if you're a response team member and someone comes to you to tell you something that's happened to them, you may become part of that fact gathering. You know, tell me your story, tell me what happened to you. They may not be ready at that point to go any further. They might not be ready to make another complaint, a written complaint. Keep in touch with them. You know, give them your number, get their number, keep in touch with them. Call them a week later or whatever. Yes?
As a church member, we just want to know what comes next.
Anybody want to?
That's a superintendent.
Yeah, I think
it's
superintendent. The thing that comes next is the response team continues to be available to you to support you. There will be an interim pastor named, perhaps one person, perhaps a series of persons, all of those folks equipped to come and work with you in the current circumstance. We will also be engaged in a process, perhaps not immediately, but at the appropriate time, to discern and name and appoint a permanent pastor to this congregation. As again, I say that may be depending on what time of year it is, maybe several months till that happens. But immediately we're working on the interim pastor. That person will be introduced to you within the next couple of weeks, and we'll get them here as soon as we can. Is that helpful?
One other thing, our team will be meeting with your congregational leaders after we finish this meeting to debrief and to consider next steps also. We certainly want to hear what you have to say.
Thank you.
So if our pastor, if John writes a letter of apology and admits everything, can he come back to our church then?
No,
That doesn't sound like grace.
it is not a healthy situation for John or the congregation. Pastor is
How do
rarely.
you don't know us? How do you make that judgment?
Yes,
I would have handed that immediately to the DS.
Yeah, me too.
Go ahead, Mike.
Let me thank you. Let me alert you to something else that we're always conscious of, but we don't always speak about. You know, we're aware of what has occurred with a member of your congregation, and we're responding to that. But you've already heard today how the potential for other victims, we're just using that word right here and now. We typically don't use that word. The potential for other victims here who may or may not step forward. We need to be sensitive to them too. And sensitive to what they may be experiencing and feeling, and be focused on their healing as well. So we are engaged in a process, as I said before, a process that none of us have chosen and none of us would have wanted. But this process takes a bit of time. Please be assured, again, that the pastor, the pastor's family, the person whom we've identified as a victim, and the victim's family are all being cared for pastorally by the response team. And you are being cared for pastorally by the response team. We will continue all those things. But there's one reason why we can't move too quickly, and perhaps not at all, in restoring a pastor to this place, because we don't know all that has been going on.
Yeah, but we are also victims of this. Now,
You bet.
we know that it's about
You bet
John,
you are.
but we're victims. You can see we were a single church. We had one mind, we had one focus, and you can tell now we've got this division going on. I think the guy's touchy-feely, so I would say I suspect that it's true, whatever it is. I suspect it's true. But how are you going to help us get through this and be back together in one mind and one heart?
Yeah, the DS just said that's a response team question. So, friends, we are here to help extend the grace of Jesus Christ to you. We opened with worship. We'll close with a hymn, because we believe we're a worshiping community. A worshiping community doesn't agree about everything all the time. A worshiping community is made up of individuals who have different experiences, different thresholds of pain, and different tolerances. But a worshiping community exhibits the grace of God to its members. Now, I have to tell you, every situation we go to is painful. Every congregation has some sense of division. It's up to the congregation to decide whether or not they're going to make those divisions fester, or whether they're going to reach across to each other and encourage one another in love and acceptance. We're here, and we will come back as many times as needed to support you in reaching out in love to one another. Some of you may have to drop out for a while because that's where you are. That's what your experience is, and you need some time for healing. And that's okay. We hope you'll rejoin the congregation in the future at some later point. I don't say that to drive anybody away. I say that because we recognize the pain that you experience. Some of you may have been the victims of abuse. In a group this size, I can almost guarantee that some of you are. We want to be careful about the things we say that trigger responses in people who've already been through it. And that's not an assignment of blame to anyone. That's a description of the reality of our lives. So, no, we don't have any easy answers. And I'm sorry we don't. And I got to tell you right now, I'm on the verge of crying because along with other members of the team, we've been through this. We've been through this too many times, with too many situations, with too much pain. We believe that God is calling us to be together. God is calling us to grow in grace and love. And we want to help you do that. We also believe that God has a positive future for this church. And if I'd been the DS, I would have said, we're going to send in a team of people. We've got a person who just retired who's done several building programs, and we're going to ask him to do that. And we've got another one who's a great business manager, and we have this fantastic guy who's been retired for 2 years who's just super with visitation. And we're going to send in a team instead of one person because we think that's what you need. But I'm not the DS, so I
Spiritual director. That was one of the most valuable parts.
My question comes out of experience. We were in a church as a response team, said we would be available to the congregation, and the contact point for that was the chair of staff parish, who when I called to say, we'd like to set up another meeting, said, well, I think we're fine, we don't need it. But there was a letter from, 20 members who were like, where are you? So it's, what's the best way? Part of me says we should go in with another date already scheduled. Say we'll be back in 2 weeks to pick up the conversation again, rather than leaving that in the hands of somebody else.
You're going to have to play that one by ear. But make sure that a number of people have contact information for the response team, so that it doesn't have to go through just one person. Yes. We're running over already.
Maybe we'll deal with this next session, but the giving of your personal number, when, like, we were in a situation where we had people that ran out of the meeting angry and we didn't know if they were gonna come back with guns. I don't want that person to have my personal number. Like, maybe we can deal with that later.
California, Nevada has an 800 number that we can hand out, that the line is monitored, and that's probably the best way to deal with it. Then you get a return call rather than speaking to somebody right away. Ideally, you have somebody answering the call 24/7, but most of us don't have situations that allow for that. So.
Okay, before we close, I want you saw some of the anger that was portrayed here. You may experience a lot more of it as a response team. I learned something when it happened to me in a small group. The convener said, when grace leaves the room, so do we. You do not have to take abuse from the congregation. Okay? You do not. That's just it. Okay? Yes? We are going to close with a hymn. Shalom. Does everybody know it? Let's stand up and sing.
Shalom to you now.
Shalom, my friends. May God's mercies bless you, my friends, in all your living and through your loving. Christ be your shalom. Christ be your shalom.
Okay, did we get more than 9 minutes, or we just get 9 minutes? Go
over, you're losing time.
Hurry.
We've been doing it all day.
Get in and out as much as you can.